Now, one of the events with which he is most associated is the events that occurred in Lincoln Jail and a major jailbreak there, an escape. How did he happen to be in Lincoln Jail to start with?
Well, things were getting very hot and heavy for the British government. Sinn Féin was doing very well, and they felt that they needed to calm the atmosphere, and they did so by inventing a plot which became known as the German plot. And briefly, that was just an accusation that they were helping Germany. It was never proven to be.
This was towards the end of the First World War.
Yes. And so Sinn Féin leaders all around Ireland were rounded up, including Eamon de Valera and Peter DeLoughry and many others, and put in various jails
in England.
And Peter DeLoughry and Eamon de Valera, Sean Milroy, who was another great Sinn Féin supporter, and Sean McGarry, who was head of the IRB, were put into Lincoln Prison. And there was no charge, nor was there a trial, obviously. And they were kept there in this fortress, which had behind it barbed wire around it. And indeed, there were actually, in my view, in two prisons. One was Lincoln, but the other prison was England itself, which was on a war footing. And even though they remained there after the First World War had ended, England was still, or Britain was still on a war footing, very high security.
And of course, by then they almost felt that they were at war with Ireland at that stage.
That's right. And they decided during their period, they had a lot of time to think. There wasn't very much.
It was a great opportunity for them, wasn't it?
It was, and strangely as well, it brought together Republicans who might not have known each other beforehand.
Yes.
So they were actually put together, and they were able to exchange ideas and get to know each other. And this was counter to what the British government wanted.
Yes. One big idea, of course, that someone had was to escape, to get out, because there was no prospect of release, because they weren't on definite fixed term sentences. They were just interned. Yes. So there was no knowing when they were going to get out.
And this was a cause of great distress with them, because they had no end point.
Yes.
And there were also, every now and then, a rumour that they were going to get out next week, and of course what would happen is they didn't get out that week. So this caused a lot of anguish and resentment in them. So close to the end of 1980, Michael J. Lennon, who was one of the prisoners who later became a district justice, he first approached Peter DeLoughry with this mad idea of trying to escape. And again, there were two prisons to escape from, Lincoln and the country itself.
Yes.
And Peter at first discounted it, and then he took it on board and said the only way you can escape from this place is to walk out of it. Which is, again, a rather bizarre way of looking at it. And from that point on, they approached de Valera, who strangely said, could it be done today? And of course, there was a lot of planning for this to come to fruition.
Talking of the planning, I mean, there were communications going in and out of the jail. The security seemed very lax there somehow.
It did, and it was lax perhaps for a few reasons. One was because of the First World War, the people who would normally run the prison were at the front.
Yes.
And replaced by people who were close to retirement, who were drafted in, perhaps who had retired.
Yes.
But there was also another element to it. The prisoners threw themselves into a range of activities. They put on plays, they had recitations, singing, they played handball, they had a choir. And the view of the warders to this was that these people are just not going to do anything. They're quite happy to be here.
Yeah.
And this had the effect, of course, of lessening the security, or of them not looking at them as closely as perhaps they should have.
So there were a number of attempts then, I think, to get keys in. I mean, I think a lot of people know the story of how the design or the template for the key was smuggled out on a Christmas, the design on a Christmas card, and came back, I think, once or maybe more than once. and it still didn't work. So eventually they got, was it blanks they got in and had to make the key themselves?
That's right, yeah. I mean, there were at least 4 attempts. I have gone into this in incredible detail, and I say at least 4 attempts. There may have been others.
Yes.
But the records are very good, DeLoughry's records, and many others. But it eventually ended up, some keys broke, some didn't fit, some got lost in the rise.
What surprised me is that they got in at all.
Yeah, again, I think the warders were deluded.
Yes, yeah.
But having said that, they were quite clever in at times being incredibly brazen.
Yes.
For example, at one point, one of the keys, which was smuggled into a cake, that they asked the person at the door, the warder, not to do anything with it because it was a birthday cake.
It was damaging the cake.
Yeah, and there was a key in it. Now you would think that would immediately raise a suspicion,
yeah,
but it didn't.
So eventually they got the blank. And Peter had some experience as a locksmith, I think, did he?
He did. He was a man of many talents and could turn his hand to most things. And one of them was locksmithing, which he credits his father. He gave him this art. And so they had to get a blank in. And the reason for this was each of the locks needed 2 shots at the bolt.
Yes.
The first one and then the second that would actually open it.
Yes.
And so Peter had to work filing this key with what he described as a stubby penknife, while one of the other prisoners kept watch in case one of the warders came down. And on a few occasions he dismantled the lock itself.
Yes.
And brought it into his cell and was working on the dimensions.
Of course, the thing about, as I understand, the thing about the locks was the one key would fit all the locks in the jail. Was that how it worked?
Yeah, this was the
master key.
The master key,
yeah.
And this is what Peter found out, including the door at the back entrance that actually allowed them to get out.
So, in short, eventually they did walk out.
They did. They got out into the outside world, and you had Eamon de Valera, Sean McGarry, going out of Lincoln Prison, and on the other side of the wall you had Michael Collins and Harry Boland waiting for them.
And they made good their escape. Now, tell me, you call the book Peter's Key. That key still exists?
The key still exists, and indeed, so too do the other blanks and keys that didn't work. And they're now in the National Museum, Collins Barracks.
So it's possible to go and see the key?
It is indeed possible to go and see and hold it.
Now, following the War of Independence and the achievement of independence, Peter, I think, he had been in local government, but he became involved in national politics then.
That's right. In the first Senate, he was appointed to that by W.T. Cosgrave, and he was among a group of quite a range of people. There was Jewess, there were poets, and this was a very interesting chamber. He got into a little trouble with that because he was seen as being soft on divorce, and divorce was actually an issue in the 1920s.
Yes.
And because of that, because he was seen as being soft on it, the Catholic Church went against him and criticised him, and he eventually lost his seat in the Senate because of this controversy.